Hello there and welcome to Black Jackal Gaming. We're going to go over the Space Marine Battle Dataslate update. Some of the good units have gone up in points, which is a little bit disappointing, and some of the guff has come down, but probably not enough to still take it. Desolation Marines have gotten a buff. The detachments remain largely untouched, and by largely I mean untouched at all. Bobby G gets a bit of love, and Space Marines were middling going into this, so we'll see where they're at now. The only change to Space Marines outside of points is for the Desolation Marines. So in the previous iterations of the Dataslate, they went down from a 5-man unit to a 4-man unit, and now they're getting it back, so they're back up to your 5-man unit, and they're going to come in at 200 points for the entire unit. So it is a nice buff for them, because they do then get an increase of 25% for the damage output for the same amount of points, but they are just getting brought to where they were previously. We'll take a look at the units that have gone up in points. First up are the Aggressors, which are now 120 points, so they've gone up by 10. They did need a small bump because you could buff them quite nicely, and they were almost an auto take for a lot of lists. Next we have Devastators, the Centurion Devastators. They've gone up by 285 points, so they're 10 points. This is a bit odd because they're not a very good unit and they weren't getting utilised that much. They were already probably slightly on the expensive side. Next we have Inceptors at 130 points. They've gone up by 10 points as well. They probably needed this because they were getting taken quite often, either 2 or 3 units per list, so they probably did need to go up a little bit. The Redempted Dreadnought is now 210 points, so he's gone up by 10 points. It's a little bit harsh. He was a good unit, but you weren't getting him spammed 3 times in list. You might see him once in every other list or once every list. So he was taken, but not often enough to really go up by 10 points. The Scout Squad has gone up to 65 points, that's a 10-point increase. This is fair enough. You were generally getting 3 squads taken in every list because they were very good at doing actions, very good at contesting objectives, and they could take out some weak units as well. They probably could go up by another 5 points to 10 points and still be an okay unit to take. The Whirlwind has gone up to 180 points, which is a 35 points increase. This is a bit extreme, but it looks like they have tried to hit the indirect units quite hard in this Dataslate. Instead of changing the indirect rule, making it a little bit more penalizing or removing any abilities that minimize the penalties, instead they've just whacked a great big amount of points onto a lot of these units. So the Whirlwind it's almost dead at 180 points. Next up we have the units that have come down in points. To start with, we got Assault Intercessors. They've gone down to 75 points, so that's a 5-point decrease. This is a reasonable change. They're quite cheap for 75 points. You can't really make them any cheaper because then you get a bit too hoardy with your Space Marines. But at 75 points, they're an okay unit, but they're going to see very little play because there's just better units available. Intercessors have also come down. They've come down by 5 points to 80. Again, this is quite reasonable. Their sticky objectives is quite nice. 80 points is a fair price for them. You might see 1 unit in a list potentially, but you're not going to see more than that. Next we have the Infernus Squad. They are 80 points as well, and they've come down by 5 points. This might still be a little bit too expensive for them. Their ability to cause battle shock is a little bit on the poor side. If they change that to a better ability, then it'd be a really good points level for them. Being 0 AP and a variable shots isn't great. And there's only really 1 detachment that you can really buff them through, and that's a 2 CP stratagem. So they can be well utilized, but they're more niche at the moment. Next up, we got the Heavy Intercessors. Again, they've come down by 5 points to 100. They probably need another 5 to 10 points knocked off of them, because even though they are a durable unit, the damage output doesn't really make up for the fact that they're 20 points more expensive than Intercessors, when Intercessors does have the sticky objectives. Having the ability to reduce damage is quite nice, but the best buff you can give them is pairing them with the Biologist, but you're seeing that guy go with the Aggressors instead, so they're just a poor cousin at the moment. Outriders have hit their 2nd point decrease. In the previous balanced Dataslate, they went down in points then as well. They've gone down to 80 points. That's 15-point decrease. It's probably a reasonable price for them. You can't go any cheaper than that, really. The damage output is just a bit too poor. They could have their profile looked at a bit, have the special ability to auto advance 6. I'd rather swap that for extra strength for attacks on the charge, just something to up their output. At the moment, they struggle to take out relatively weak units, so even at 80 points, you might take 1. to score secondaries and contest parts of the board, but you're rarely going to see more than one unit, if even one unit on the board. Sternguard veterans are dropped to 90 points. Again, that's a 10-point decrease. The price is okay for the bolters. At this point, the combi weapons are all but dead. Losing the 4 reroll to wounds just means that the ballistic skills 4 and then having to wound on 4 to get the devs, you're going to drop too many shots to really take the combi weapons. But for the bolters, which does come with the devastating wounds and the extra shots and the AP, they're getting towards the nice price for them. You might take one. If you're going to take Intercessors, you might as well upgrade the 10 points to these guys just to get the devastating wounds. But they are sitting at that spot where you can't really consider them because there's just better options available. Bobby G's come down to 350 points, so that's a 10-point deduction. He's very reasonably priced. He's got some decent buffs he can give out. He's got a good defensive capabilities, very durable. He's okay in melee. He's actually in that price point now where you can consider building around him. He could do with coming down a little bit more, but you can see him on the field a lot more often than you did previously. And finally, the detachment have been untouched. It's a real shame because the first company task force isn't that great at the moment. It's really lacking in damage and utility. It needs a detachment rule change really. Having a one turn a game you get full rerolls to wound against one target isn't that great. At the very least, change that to reroll ones to wound, and that's for all 5 turns for one target, and you can choose each command phase. That gives you a little bit more utility out of it. The restrictions for the stratagems for the strength need to be removed. Too many of them are based on you being at half strength or below half strength, and for Terminators, which are just okay units, to then have a stratagem to make them remain their okay units. I'd rather see more stratagems that bump them past what they currently start as. The Stormlands Task Force could have done with having a little look over as well. It is towards the middling spot. It's got some good stratagems you can use, and the war gear is okay, but it's just restrictive of where you can take it. If they added in the jump pack to the war gear and the stratagems, it'd give you a little bit more utility. You can use the new captain and the new assault intercessors, and you've just got more options available for you, more ways to do damage and contest board control. Because you are limited to the mounted options, the ATVs and the chaplains not coming down in points does really hurt you. The ATVs really could drop by 10 points and there still be a not too powerful option, and the chaplain on the bike's the only character you can really get buffs from for being mounted. The Outriders have gone down in price, but the chaplain could be a little bit cheaper to go along with them. Then there's the Shield Anvil and Firestorm, which are slightly weaker than the other options. They could really do with a reduction in war gear because they're not too far behind. They're in touch and distance of being as good as the other ones. Cheaper war gear will help them along, and things such as the Immolation Stratagem coming down to 1 CP. It'd be quite powerful at 1 CP, but there's only a certain amount of units you can actually use it on, and it's short range units, so getting that additional bump on those would be really nice, and really lean into the detachment as well because it's slightly lacking in comparison to some of the others. Well, that's it, Space Marine fans. That's it for another 3 months. We're going to have to hunker down, try our best with what we've got, and hopefully not do too well, and then we'll get some bumps up along the way, but it's going to be downward for a bit. Space Marines were middling. They'll continue to be middling. They'll have the odd bumps and do really well in tournaments. Good players can do a lot of movement with them if they're playing into the right options, but with new codexes coming out, and you always the power creep. Things like the new Dakari Dataslate, that's going to be really powerful into Space Marines. That's got a lot of utility to it. Until the next balanced Dataslate, we're probably going to go a bit downwards and be where we were for a lot of Ninth, and that's in the bottom quarter of all the factions really. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any comments, then pop them below in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, then please hit the like button as it greatly helps the channel. Hit the subscribe button to see any future Warhammer content. Take it easy and see you next time for more grim darkness from the 41st millennium.